Hello everybody, let's get into Unreal. But first we have to get our model out to Unreal. So I just want to go over a few things in Maya before we get started. I have all of my pieces in here that are going to be used, and I have them all cleaned up and named properly, and I want to make sure that I'm organized because if you get a lot of assets in Unreal, then it can get really messy. One of the things I want to show is that I did a little sculpt on this dirt in ZBrush, but if you bring stuff in from ZBrush, you'll note that it has no smoothing normals. So you just want to go to like Mesh Display and Soften Edges and then delete your history. So then that way this will come in properly into Unreal. So there we go. Okay, and let's talk about materials. So if I select this, I'm going to hit Control A to look at my attribute editor. Of course the history is deleted, so you can see I don't have anything in here except for the basic stuff. And I have a material in here and pottery. Now when we're in Unreal, we can set up our own materials and we don't need to basically use this, but what I like to do is just make sure everything has a material on it. For instance, I haven't even put one on here yet, so I'll go to Assign New Material, and in case I want to do an Arnold render later, I'll just throw an Arnold on there, and we'll just call this m_dirt. And what'll happen is that dirty, I like that. What'll happen is that when we bring these into Unreal, these materials will basically, it's not going to be an Arnold material in there, but there'll be a material called mdirt that's assigned to it. So if you want to just have like a really basic setup, which when you're first getting into Unreal might be the best way to go, is just do something really simple. It might be a good idea. Just throw a material, separate material onto each piece and name it accordingly. So for instance, we'll do that one more time. Let's see, so we have favorite materials, standard surface, and we'll go ahead and name this m_leaves, like that. Okay, so I have this trunk, and let's see, we're gonna delete the history. Let's get a couple things in there. I'm just double checking everything. So this just has the Lambert 2, which is actually okay. That's not really a big deal, but I would want to name it and say like m_branches. And then I have a smaller set of branches here, and these also have the same material on them. So you could just apply the same material, right click, assign existing material, and say m_branches. So they'll have the same material on them. Okay, so we've got this. All right, looks like everything is ready to go. Now you can technically just export this whole thing, and if we're doing like a simple setup, this might be like the easiest way to do it, is just export these and then set up the material separately. If you want, you can export these separate pieces if you wanted to be able to adjust them later without having them all as one piece. But for this time, we're just going to go simplified. So we'll grab everything, and you can see we got everything selected, and make sure your stuff's clean, you've frozen all your transformations and all that stuff, so that you're not going to get any weird things happening when you export these. File, we say export selection. You know what, before I do that, it is also possible that you just combine everything as well. You could go here and go mesh combine, and so now they're literally like one piece. But again, the reason why I'm saying that showing these different methods, because this method is going to have these things so that they're kind of all locked into place. You won't be able to adjust the size of them separately per se. So let's go ahead and we'll do it like this. We'll just leave it combined like that. We'll say export selection, and then I'm going to come into I have a geo folder here, and I'm going to make a new folder, and I'm going to say call this UE5. So that's the stuff that's going to go into Unreal 5. I'll call this my bonsai 04. Export selection, and really we're just looking for geo, so smoothing groups, smooth mesh, you know, just make sure you have these checked, export, and everything should go out. One last thing before we jump out of here. I'm going to actually undo the fact that I just combined those because I want to keep the file so it's easy to select these things later. So I'll keep it like this. So if I save my file, you know, it's all saved in its original format. I do want to mention that if you get into more advanced stuff and you want to like layer different UV maps together, I'm going to show this trunk. I went ahead and put 2 UV sets in here. So I have this one that came from Houdini, and this is great for doing like a detail map and tiling a detail map. And then I have one that I laid out. Originally, I showed some packing of the UVs, and I had some of these branches flipped. Unreal 5, I don't know if this is a mistake or this always happens, but it was when I was trying to blend materials, it was having problems with the flipped. You know, when these were rotated, these flipped islands, like so this one, so it fit in here better, I would have it like this. And I was getting like normal map issues when it got to the seam. So I went and turned them all in the same direction. So if you end up doing something where you're going to layer normal maps on top of each other, like a macro normal map and then a detail micro normal map, you may need to put these all in the same direction so that the normals work together. Not 100% sure if that's just like a bug or what, but just wanted to mention it. Okay, so we'll jump into Unreal. And I'm going to go ahead and launch. So if you just bring up your Epic Games, and I'm going to launch it. There is 5.2 now, but I'm still working on in 5 just because of the fact that I'm trying to keep it the same between my home and my work. All right, so after it opens, you'll get a window that looks something like this. Now, if you don't have any recent projects, it's not going to be set to that. You'll have to have something like this. I'm going to just do games, and I'll do first person shooter, and I'm going to have the starter content. If you have an RTX card, you can check the ray tracing and it'll set up all the ray tracing stuff. I actually don't. I have 2 1080 Ti's, so I do have a beefy system, but I don't have that ray tracing ability. I'm going to set this up and call it Bonsai 4. I already have one called Bonsai, but this one's going to be Bonsai 04, and then I'll just hit create. And let me see if there's just anything else. Yeah, we're doing this for desktop, so we can put in the most graphics power. And what the first person shooter will allow you to do is you can actually jump into the level and run around, and once again it's opening on my other screen, so you're not seeing my Unreal Editor screen coming up, but it is showing. Okay, I tried to screen grab it, but it didn't work. Okay, so you should get something that looks kind of like this. And if you want to have some fun, you can go ahead and just hit the play button, and you can use your mouse, your left click to move, to start moving you, and then you can use the W, S, A, D, and combinations thereof to run around the level. You can spacebar to jump, that type of thing, if you just want to check out and see what the level's like. So basic first-person shooter controls. And then if you want to pick up the gun, this is going to get loud because it always fires like super loud. You can pick up the gun, left click, and you can start shooting things just for fun. If you just want to run around here and just see what it looks like. Okay, so we can escape out of that. Just hit escape button. And now we are in Unreal. Cool. So what do we do? I've got my middle mouse to pan. I've got my Alt left click to rotate. I can select something just like mine, hit F, and it will rotate around it. So I'm Alt left mouse, and then again middle mouse. And then you can also just right click to rotate the camera, and you can right click and hold Alt to zoom in and out. So it's pretty much like Maya. It's pretty close to Maya's setup. So, and you can roll the mouse wheel as well to zoom in and out. There's other controls, but you don't really need to know all of those just for this. We're just learning how to set a very simple thing up in Unreal. so we can get started. This is not an advanced setup. It's actually just a very basic setup, just again, so we can just get our feet wet, if you will. Okay, so then let's get into that. So we have a content drawer here, and if we click on that, it'll just pop up from the bottom. And what we usually want to do is start off with making folders for our either our meshes, our materials, our textures. So I'm just going to go ahead in the content folder here. I'm going to hit add, and then I'm going to say new folder, and I'm going to call this meshes. And so just add a mesh folder, and we'll do the same thing for materials. So we'll add a new folder, and actually we'll do a textures, because the materials, the way I'm going to show this one, the materials should come into the mesh folder when I import, but we'll want to import our textures separately. So I'm going to go ahead and just double click inside of here. So now I'm inside here. I can right click, and you can say, you know, import to, or there's just an import button right here. You can hit import, and then we can go ahead and search for our object that we exported, which should be inside of here, geo, and then UE5. So I'm going to go like this and say open. And you're going to get a bunch of different settings in here that you can set up, but you don't really need to mess with this. You could, you know, for instance, I know this is going to come in like really small, because the import uniform scale, so Unreal is like at 1 meter, and in Maya you're at centimeters. So I could go ahead and say, you know, import scale, and say import all, and let it come in. Wait for it. Sorry, my Maya was flagging me to save my file. So we're waiting, and while we're waiting, you can look over here on the right side, and you can see these are all of these cubes and objects that are already in the level. This is basically like your outliner in Maya. You can, you know, set up groups and, you know, tie things together and parent things, and it'll have information, properties for them below. And you can manipulate how this is set up if you want to do your own custom setup. You can see this is taking a little bit of time, but that's okay. So you can see we have the bonsai itself, and then we have these materials. So if I drag the bonsai out, maybe the size was right. I remember this before being different, so wow. Okay, well, maybe I had that part wrong. So here I can go ahead, if I want, I can lock all the scale together. So you see we have that selected in the outliner, and you know, I can lock the scale, and then I can just change this to like 0.1, and there we go. That's more realistic. Okay, so I thought it before, I remember it coming in like super small, but maybe I did something differently this time. I don't know. Anyway, that's up to you. Obviously scale however you feel fit. If you're trying to like rest this right on the surface, and you notice like there's like a, well, actually it is good. That's good. It looked like it was floating. But if you're wanting to work kind of like in a game style, you're almost always going to have your snaps on. And then like I probably would want to have this like pivot for the whole thing over in the corner here, so that I can snap it on top of other you know, tables or something like that. But as long as it's right at the bottom, as long as your pivot's right at the bottom, it should go nicely and snap right onto surfaces. So you're sort of working in a grid or in a pattern where you're actually, you know, always snapping to like a whole unit, so then that way it's you know, it's easy to set up levels and place things on top of things and stuff like that. We can see from the just getting going here that this, you know, it's getting a little bit of color and stuff from the lighting. They have like an HDR lighting set up by default, and like a direct light. You can see these over here. That's what like these icons are, some of these different lights. Let me see if I can move this down a little bit so you can see more in here. If you don't want all of these things in here, you know, you can just grab them and delete them. You don't have to have all of these. So that's up to you. I eventually probably will get rid of a lot of this stuff because I'm just going to set this up for like a render. So I'll probably have like a backdrop, but you know, you don't have to. You can go ahead and just minimize these. And so you don't have to look at all of them. You know, you have your lighting folder it gave you by default, your cylinders, blocks, all this good stuff. You know, so you don't want to look at all that stuff. Just go ahead and hide it. Here's the bonsai, and then some of these things, like that's the rifle, that's the player start. You have to have like an actor in there that lets the player start, and we won't need to deal with any of this. We're just going with a basic setup. So if I select this bonsai and I go ahead and look at it, and you can see that there's all these different materials that are on the bonsai. You can see where its location is. You know, if you want it in the center of the world, you can hit 000 here. Of course, it's going to move it outside of this area. So I'm not going to worry about that right now. But let's talk about just setting up a basic, like super simple material, nothing fancy. We'll start off with the trunk. So I'm just going to double click on this. And then once you double click on it, the window for the material will come up. It has a parameter set up into it. I don't know where it got this parameter from. But basically this is just a, you know, like an RGB color that you can set. You know, you can double click on it and, you know, you can change it to whatever you want. But we don't even need that. So we're going to hit OK. And I can just delete it. So just hit delete. And to get a texture in here, so that we can, or basically like so you can load your textures in, you can hold T on your keyboard and then just click in here, and it will be a texture sample will come in. And this is where we can load our textures into. Of course, we're going to connect that to the base color. It doesn't have anything in here yet, so it's saying, hey, something's wrong. It's giving you an error, but we'll go ahead and fix that. The other way you can do that is you can right click and you can hit texture. So we see texture sample, it came right up. That's like the main one that you're using. So you can click on that and then you have the same thing as here. But if you just hold T, you know, and you can just hit Control C, Control V if you want to like paste this in again. So like if you're going to put in your metallic or specular or roughness or whatever you're going to put in, that's how you would go ahead and do that. So now that we have this, let's actually go back to our content drawer and let's make a new folder. So we'll go to content. Oh, actually we made the folder, sorry. So we have our texture folder and we'll go ahead and hit import. And now we're going to go ahead and look for the textures that we need for this, which I should have them all in here. And all right, so we'll start off with, you can grab multiple at once and we'll get some messages that we'll have to like basically say okay to as they come in, specifically about the normal map. I'm going to grab this. I'm just making sure I have the right things selected here. We want the normal, checking back roughness. We'll bring in these. You don't have to necessarily even have all of these. I don't think I need that one. I want that one. It's easier just to grab them all at the same time. And I think that's good. Okay, so you know what? Maybe I'll bring these in too because I might show you that later. So since I'm already here, yeah, I don't want the JPEGs. All of my stuff that I want is the PNGs. So I'll say open, and then it's just going to go through this process of loading all of these into this folder. You'll see here, these are the messages I was talking about. So it's asking about the normal map. It can read that it's a normal map, and you're going to say yes or okay because it's right that those are normal maps, and it's actually seeing it in the name convention too. So all right, so we've got that in, and here's our texture sample, and you can see over here on this side there's this texture and it says none, and you can come into here and just click on this, and then you can start typing in the name of the texture. Now another way you can do this is you can go into your content drawer, and this is another way to actually make a node here, a texture sample node. It's just come into your content drawer and you can say, okay, we're working on the trunk, so I know I'm going to need this trunk bark. Okay, and you pull it in there and you can see, oh, hey, it made the same exact thing, like Unreal Smart most of the time, and it knows what you want. So you can just drive that in there. And so now we have that on this. If you want to change the object that it's on, so you can visualize it, you can do that. You can make it a plane, whatever you want. There's a few different things in here. And then you can actually load up your own static mesh as well. We don't really need to do that right now. We'll just keep it like this. And let's go ahead and we can actually just do it the easy way, which is like we'll just pull in the normal map. And of course that's going to go in the normal. And if we come in here and look at this now, you can see, oh, it looks a lot more bumpy. Now it's not tiling exactly the way we would expect it to, but that's because this texture is twice as tall as it is wide. So it is going to look a little bit like crunched in there. And I can go ahead and just grab a bunch of these at once. So look at the height. I'm probably not going to hook up the height because I've sort of done a medium poly sculpt on this, so it looks already broken up. I don't really need a height map, but I can show you how to set that up in a later video. Okay, so we bring all these in. You can see like you just can grab all of them and start putting them in. I like to stay organized. So I'm going to go ahead and, which one was this? This is the AO. Okay. Now I haven't done any texture packing. Again, this is like the sort of the most basic way to start. But you know, when you get more advanced, you take all of the grayscale textures and you pack them into one texture and put them in each one in a channel. And that would be for a later video too, but I just want to get everybody started. This is the roughness. Let's get that in there. And I also like to basically organize these so they're all in order, just to keep it neat and clean, because these node graphs can get messy looking. And the world position offset is where you would have the height map, but you have to set up a couple other things to make it work correctly. But we'll just throw it in here for now, just so it's there. And okay, so let's take a look at this. You can see it looks pretty bumpy, looks cool. Now what you need to do is you have to save this. So you can hit save all, or you can just hit save right here. I'm just saving all because I've just brought in a bunch of new stuff that I want to be saved into this level. So you can see it's going through each texture and saving out each texture. And the moment that this is completely done saving, I can go back to my viewport and see what that looks like. So I'm going to go ahead and minimize this and let it do its thing. Though it's taken a hot second, of course, because what it's doing is it's going to save these into basically the game folder that all of these things will be set up in. So it's gonna go ahead and put it in a separate spot as well. So let's just minimize it that way then. Okay, so I saved it, and why is it not coming up? All right, let me go back to my graph here. Let's say save. Okay, I guess it didn't actually, there we go. All right, so now it's actually working. So that's what I was looking for. Okay, let's go ahead and I'm going to close this for right now. You can see it's updated here, so make sure you save it like I did the second time. But let's go ahead and double click on this object. And this is the disadvantage of bringing this in all as one piece, is that if I go ahead and I look at the UVs, you know, it's going to look like this. It's going to be a royal mess. But if I had separate objects, I can look at the UVs, you know, individually, and it won't be such a mess. Basically, the trunk is the only thing I have 2 UV sets on, and everything else is just 1 UV set. And then Unreal makes a second set of UVs so that it can do light maps and bake light maps onto this. Okay, so this is how you would look at your asset. You could just double click on it and it'll bring it up. You could go into your actual content drawer and find it in your meshes and do the same thing. You can just double click on it and it will come up, which we already have it up, so it's like, nothing's happening. Okay, so I just want to show that you can do that, and you can, you know, come into here and change which, you know, what all your materials from here. Like I can go to here to the branches. So the branches is actually going to be pretty much the same setup as the trunk. So what I could do, the trunk's going to be a little bit different just because I'm going to adjust the UV sets. And actually I might have to adjust the branch UV sets too. So maybe I should just do that all at once. We'll go ahead and I'm going to double click on the material again. And so the next thing to think about is the texture coordinates. So I can right click and start typing in text, and you can see this is the most common thing that you use in here. So I can go ahead and go texture coordinates, drive that into the UVs, and it was already by default just giving it the, you know, 0 to 1 space normal texture coordinates. But in here, if you put in a text coordinate, you can see in the properties you can go ahead and change this to like 2. And so now this is starting to look more normal because I'm actually tiling it, the UVs twice over that. I can put in maybe 3. See what that looks like. And see if this is, now the key is you got to save it and look at it on your mesh. So save that out. Look at that on your mesh. And well, we made a mistake though, because we need to also pipe this into all these other ones. So if you were in Maya, you would also have a texture coordinate node going into all your materials too. Unless you look at your hypershade, you might not notice it, but it's in there as well. So this is very common. And let's see what this looks like now. Aha, so here we go. So now we see this and it's starting to look like really nice bark. Look at that. So we got this bark from photogrammetry, and you know, the results are stellar because photogrammetry is from the real world, so it actually looks fantastic. So that's great. And this is basically the most basic way to set up a material. This is if you just sort of want to use Unreal as like a little renderer and you don't want to get into all the technical stuff, you can set it up kind of like this. You can see in the texture swatches it's showing like this tiling and stuff. It's working out well now. That's the way we want it. But if you zoom in here, you can see it's kind of tiling everything. That's fine because we have the texture coordinate set. Now you can get into really complex material setups that are efficient for games and efficient for the workflow in games. We'll do a little bit of that in later videos, but for this is just basic. So let's go ahead and we'll do one more, and then the rest should be kind of self-explanatory, except for maybe the leaves too. Actually, I sort of want to do the dirt. I don't know why, but I'm like, there's a part of me that's like, do the dirt. Okay, so let's go ahead and start messing with that. So I have these are all the different dirt. That's actually like a moss and dirt, and that's a roughness, and that's a trunk. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just drag all these into here. We'll delete that, and we'll get these in order. Okay, I want to note something here. This is very light compared to what you see here. Let's change this to color instead of linear color. So it, by default, it was putting it as linear color, and that's actually not the color space that we want. Again, in this tutorial, I'm trying to stay away from you know, having too many issues. But look what happens then when we do that. When I go ahead and bring that in as a linear, if it's not a linear color, all of a sudden it's giving me an error message. Okay, so we're going to have to talk about how we are going to mitigate that issue. Okay, so you can see if I have this on linear color, it works, it doesn't break, but it looks really bright here, and this is actually about what it should look like. This is just bringing it up in the viewer. This has to do with color space. It's a bit more advanced topic, so I don't really want to get into it too much, but let's just basically say this. Unreal imported this as a linear color, which means it didn't have like a gamma applied to it. And gammas for how you see stuff on the monitor. So it's basically brightening it because it thinks that it needs that gamma added to it. Like I said, that's for a different topic, but let's go ahead and just go into our content drawer and double click on our texture. And you can see like it looks correct here, but it's not working correctly in the material. So what we want to do is just turn on the sRGB right here. Let's turn that on. Okay, and you can see right away it just pops back. It's like, oh, now it's broke. But if we turn the color on now, it works, but we still have the problem that it's looking super, super bright. So we can come up here to this little panel. It's open right here, so you could just swap between these, by the way. And we also need to change the source color settings right here. So you'll have to look for the source color settings, and it's encoding override. We want to go ahead and change this to sRGB, and then boom, it looks correct. So that's what we're looking for. You can say save and give it a second, and then when we come back into here, and now we have it. So it looks good. Okay, so yeah, pretty simple, not too hard. Color space is something that would be for a future topic. So let's go ahead and let's see here. This is our ambient occlusion. I like to put these in order, of course, and we need the roughness, and this is the height. Roughness, okay. So let's drag that roughness into here. Let's drag the normal in. And again, we'll just leave the height for now. I actually sculpted the dirt so it has like a little bit of bumpiness to it, and that way you don't necessarily need to do the height, especially with the new Unreal Nanite stuff. You can bring in higher poly stuff, and if it's for a PC. If you're working on something else like mobile, you wouldn't want to do that. It looks like pretty shiny. Maybe I need to look at some of my settings here. So let's look at this now. So select that, hit F. You can then rotate around it, and I can see what it's doing here. So that's not too bad. I'm seeing it looks like that might have a little texture stretching in here, so I might have to go and relax that a little bit, do an unfold or something like that. And this is a tileable texture, I believe, so if we want to go back into here and we want to do the text coordinates, you can just get that again, and then you can plug it into all of these. It'll just be by default 1 to 1 at first, but we can see, hey, does it need less? Does it need more? So let's go ahead and just go 2 by 2, and then you have to hit save, of course. And yeah, I kind of like that. I feel like that might look a little bit better than it did before, looking at it from a distance. You are getting a little bit of repeat there, but you could always make this 1.5 or something like that. That might actually work better. So save. Maybe you won't see that repeat, and it'll still look detailed enough. Yeah, that's kind of doing it. It's repeating. Here's a stone, and here's the same stone over here, but it's far enough away that you might not notice it. So that's not bad. And then you get like kind of the dirts on the edge there. That maybe makes sense. All right, we save this. Oh, we already did that. Let's go ahead and do the leaves, because that's the other thing that we need to set up properly to make sure that we can get some translucency. All right, leaf time. Okay, so let's talk about this leaf. Basically, I just went into the leaf material, double clicked on it, and then I went to my content drawer for my textures, and I dragged 3 of these in here. I'm actually not even using a translucent. I made a translucent texture, which is basically just like a brighter version of the leaf texture, but you really don't have to use that. I just drag these into here and then I connected the node. So let's talk about what is connected here. We'll make this bigger. So we have the RGB going into the base color, and then I have the alpha for that going into the opacity mask. You won't have everything set up in here. You won't see some of these things until you set the settings in the material properly. So I just have this at the surface, and then I have this set at mask. So you may need to set that so that you can see the opacity mask. Okay, so then you'll be able to see that. And then I go to the shading model and I set that to two-sided foliage, and you have to check this box too to be true. So you should be getting at that point something that looks similar to this, and then make sure that we actually, I think that was it. Yep, two-sided foliage. Yeah, I didn't even have to set the set it to translucency or anything like that. This will work just fine. But I did take the leaf texture and I ran that into the subsurface color. And I'll show you what it looks like with and without. So let me go ahead and just pull this to my other screen so we can see the viewport. So this is saved out currently. Now you have to be underneath a light source to see the translucency actually happening. So if I'm up here, it's just going to look like basically any other leaf. But the moment I get underneath, you can kind of see how it changes based on the lighting angle. And once I'm underneath like that, it will look different. Now watch me break this subsurface color. So I'm just going to hold Alt and click on this line here, and I'll go ahead and save it, and you'll see what happens here. And that's what it would look like by default without having the translucency plugged in, or that subsurface color, I should say, plugged in. So we plug it back in, we press save, and there you go. That's it. It's not really that hard to set up because Unreal 5 is sort of making things, it's a nice advanced viewer. You can do all kinds of really cool stuff. So there's a couple other things. Let's go ahead and just look at what else we have in here. So we can go into meshes, and the only thing I haven't set up so far is the pottery. Now I do want to talk about what I did with the branches. I went into the trunk and I just copied these. I didn't copy the shader itself, but I just copied all of these, Control C, and then I went over into the branches and I just pasted those in and then plugged them into their appropriate spots. And then I changed the texture coordinate because it was way too tiled for the little tiny branches. So right now I have it at U 0.5 and V at 0.25. And so if we go into the actual branches, I don't love it, but it's not bad. I mean, it's sellable if you're not like right up on top of these things. So you can see it actually looks like the same as this, but just sort of tiled more. And in the real world, when you start getting into the branches, it usually doesn't have the bark flaky like this. It usually becomes a lot more solid bark. So I would really have to just make a different material if I was going to make it work more realistic, or look more realistic, I should say. So, but this will work too, is about, just tile it less so that it doesn't look, super small on the branches. And so then for the last thing, we can just go over this one more time. We just go into the pottery, and this one I'm going to show you a cool little trick you can do here. We'll get our texture drawer out. This is my pottery roughness, my pottery normal. I have a bump in here, which I actually think is my height, but I don't really need that. I'm going to go ahead and grab this. I even made a spec for this one. So, you know, that's an option in here too. There's a specular, and it can further refine where the highlights are and how they work. So let's go ahead and just start plugging these in. But before I get too far, I just want to show one thing here. Instead of going ahead and just plugging this directly into the base color, I'm going to make a multiply. So I'm going to hit M on my keyboard, or you can right click and type in multiply, but I'm going to just hit M, click, and a multiply comes up. And what I'm going to do is put this in as B, and then I'm going to put this color in as A. And now I'm going to drive that into the base color. And what I'll do is, give it a second. Are we getting a problem with the, let's see here. So, oh, I know what's going on. It's all the way down here. Yeah, I was doing this so I could lay out other stuff into here. So yeah, it's actually all the way at the bottom. So let's go ahead and just turn this into like a cube here. Okay. So right now there's going to be like this little tint on here. Let me turn this back to white and hit OK. And actually, as I change this to green, you can see it's actually tinting my pottery. So this is how in the future we can get into more advanced materials where you can basically, you know, have a little bit of control to modify this and make this look a little bit more unique by adding in color. Now I'm happy with the color it's at, so I'll just leave it white for now, and I'll just leave it like this. So that's fine. But I just wanted to show, like, there's all kinds of crazy mixes you can do here. Pretty much any kind of blending mode you see in Photoshop, you can basically set up in here, like an overlay or a soft light and stuff like that. That can all be set up in here. This is the specular, so let's drive that into the spec and see what happens here. So you can see all of a sudden certain parts are more highlighted or more shiny, certain parts aren't. Then we'll add in the roughness. Let's bring that over here. Now this is a 1-for-1 texture, so I don't really have to put a text coordinate on it because it's going exactly on the UV. So now you can see with the roughness. So the spec and the roughness are kind of conjoining together, and then we'll do the final thing, which is put the normal in. And I don't have an ambient occlusion for this one because I actually hand painted this texture. Mostly I did it in Substance Painter, but I made a hand painted texture in Photoshop that I did with just like these natural dry brushes and stuff like that. You know what? I lied. I did it in Affinity Photo. It wasn't Photoshop now that I think about it, but basically the same thing. I was checking out the new brushes in Affinity Photo and seeing how they worked, and I actually really like them. So if you need like a cheap version of Photoshop, it's not as good as Photoshop, I'll say that, but it's definitely it's not bad either. So I'm gonna go ahead and just close this. Let's take a look at what that looks like now, and we'll back off a little bit here. Let's look from the other side so we can see the sun will be hitting it more from this side. And you know, I have the sun like here. We'll do it through the rotation. We'll just rotate this a little bit differently so we can go like that, make it look a little bit more like sunset. You can actually see the lighting's even sort of changing to kind of look like golden hour as you rotate it. Source light angle. Actually, this was the wrong thing for me to set, so I should probably undo that. But that's a basic setup. So hit F, and we can rotate around it, and you can see nice looking little bonsai pot here. You know, we'll talk about lighting later, creating lights and stuff like that, but yeah, so this is a good start. Just, you know, take the light, rotate it to an angle that looks good to you, you know, and then you can just basically see what you got, and we can talk more about lighting and post-processing later. Okay, thanks for watching, and have fun with this. This is really great to be able to see everything in real time. I'm going to save all and move on to the next subject.